Welcome back. Recently I wrote a piece on switzer.com.au arguing that disruption in industries like the taxi industry and all these people providing rooms and competing against hotels should be more regulated. And then Jim Stewart of Stewart Media bagged me on Twitter. So I told him to come on my television program to set me straight. So here he is, all the way in Melbourne. Hi Jim, how are you?
G'day Peter, good thanks. To be fair, I didn't bag, I shared your post and said I disagreed with most of it.
that's a bagging where I come from. And the irony was I was actually in a car coming from the airport in Melbourne, and I was being bagged by a so-called mate of mine in Melbourne. So let me state my case, the case of normal people. You've got taxi drivers out there who've paid for paid a lot of money to get a taxi licence. And all of a sudden, some bloke just turns up with his car and starts taking over his business. And you've got hotels that, take out insurance and employ people. And all of a sudden, some person at the Pascoe Vale in Melbourne has a room at the back of his garage and he rents it out, and therefore poor old Hilton Hotel loses a customer, and they sack a worker and they go on the dole and all that sort of stuff. But okay, in those industries we might be able to cope, but will it be like financial planners and doctors and lawyers? Any joker just puts out a shingle and says, yeah, I'm going to compete. Jim, over to you.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you would agree free market is a wonderful thing, everyone competing and the best product wins. I mean, if we wanted government regulating internet or new digital businesses, we wouldn't be where we are today with the internet. I mean, let's face it, Google had 1 billion users of its service before it did any advertising, and all the other search engines just died because they were no good. Yeah, they didn't serve the market.
Yeah, but Google was not interfering with anybody else. Sure, they were competing with libraries, providing information, and they're really delivering something really new and beneficial. All we're getting with, so let's take Uber. We'll just concentrate on Uber. It's a pretty simple one. They're arguably providing competition for taxis to lift their game, and they really need to lift their game. But you've got the insurance issue there, Jim. Like if a car accident in a taxi, we are covered because they've got the insurance to cover it. We're not quite sure with Uber. Uber's kind of, the company says, oh, well, we'll stand behind anyone who has a problem. But that really hasn't been tested. We're not quite sure about it. So what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, all the Uber drivers that I speak to, and I use primarily Uber. If I can't get an Uber, I'll use a cab. But, certainly the things that you're talking about, like fees and licensing fees to the government, that's a real issue for cab drivers. But the market has said that they want something else, and they're marching with their feet. As far as the insurance goes, everyone I've spoken to at Uber said you're covered if you're in an accident. And the experience, as you pointed out in your article, is a great experience as opposed to a cab. Now, if the cab companies, were able to, upgrade their services, so I could just book one on an app and it just arrives and I know who the driver is and I can ring the driver and see the driver and I can rate the driver, and I know who I'm getting in the cab with, it's better for the driver and the customer, I would say.
Okay. Well, one of the things I did put in the article was, it was relevant because the Melbourne Cup was on, a lot of these alternative betting agencies to the TAB put on fantastic offers of, up to $500, I'll match your bet. And in the past, I've actually had very big bets on the Melbourne Cup, and I'm not a big punter, but at Melbourne Cup time, I like to often back the favourite and put maybe a couple of hundred on, and these other agencies double it, so all of a sudden you got $400 on a favourite, and it has worked for a few years. But nowadays, there's a little asterisk which says not applicable in New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia. So in a sense, they're protecting their TAB and the money they get, those governments, and so they don't like disruption to the TAB, but they're not really working hard to look after the taxi industry. That would love the New South Wales government, for example, to say no Uber because these people are not regulated. What do you say about that, Jim?
Well, I mean, you know, a protection racket's a protection racket, right? Like, if I'm paying the government money, I want them to protect me. So, but, you know, the free market has said that, you know, well, we want this product, so we're going to go after it. I mean, I think it's the reason the government's involved is that they stand to lose, you know, a lot of licensing revenue, you know, if Uber takes off as big as it has in other parts of the world.
Okay, so is there any case of where you'd be worried about disruption?
Well, no, we've got laws in the real world, not in the digital world. We've got laws to protect people. I mean, I can't say I haven't seen a case where, you know, that needs to be changed. And I think, you know, you said before, well, you know, Google doesn't affect it. Well, I think, you know, Census would disagree with you in the yellow pages. You know, there's a lot of digital, and certainly, you know, a lot of the newspapers would disagree with you as well. And I think that what the internet has become so great a tool for personal use, business, whatever, without any government regulation at all. Now, disruption in the real world, if you're subject to local laws because you're driving a car or whatever, then that has to be nutted out and worked out. But at the end of the day, if it's safe, if it's good for the user, if it's good for the market, then, you know, why stand in the way of it?
The issue, I think, of, you know, newspapers and census, Google didn't do anything that they weren't allowed to. All they did was provide stuff basically free of charge, and also provide arguably a better service as well. The issue, I guess, gets to, okay, let's take financial planning. To be a financial planner, you have to, you know, pass various examinations and have a licence and all that sort of stuff. What do you think about that if just anybody just, you know, created a great website and said, you know, I'll give you financial advice? What do you say about that? Because that's disruption, but it's also, in a sense, breaking a regulation. So are you happy with that kind of thing?
No, not if you're breaking a regulation of a jurisdiction that you're in, you're going to get prosecuted. I would also say, you know, buyer beware. You can do a lot of investigation on the internet before you sign up to these things, and that was certainly the case with me with Uber. I researched it thoroughly before I handed my credit card details over, and I think that, you know, if a business starts off in the digital realm, and let's say take financial planning, you know, the user has to take some responsibility for their own actions as well. But, you know, if you're subject to local laws, you need to obey those local laws in the country that you're operating in. And Uber's just done that with the ACT.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is that there are people around the world who think with Uber and Airbnb that they are breaking certain laws and regulations that they, the incumbents, have been forced to follow, you know, and I think that's, and I think the best case of where taxi drivers took the law into their own hands was Paris, where they started burning Uber cars and belting up the drivers. I guess that's another situation again. Jim, what are you seeing out there? Because, you know, you are on the cutting edge of what's going on on the internet. Well, are there other disruptive businesses coming along that will surprise us, like Uber and Airbnb have done?
Yeah, every day you hear of something like, you know, there's the Uber of this or the Uber of that, or the, you know, every day there's a new business emerging that seeks to disrupt traditional businesses. I mean, you know, in Australia we've got realaz.com, which is the app for real estate investors that is upsetting a lot of real estate agents around the country, and that's an Australian one. So there's all sorts of things coming out all the time, and, you know, there'll be another one tomorrow, and business has to adapt.
Yep.
And if you're subject to regulations and it's costing you money to do so, then you really need to work out how that's going to fit in a digital economy and beat the next person to it.
All right, mate. We're out of time. Thanks for joining us. What's your website, Jim?
Thanks, Peter. StuartMedia.com.au.
All right, buddy. Thanks for joining us.